The air grew cold, fast. I could taste the change, metallic on my tongue. It wasn't just outside, it was inside too. A sudden, sharp absence where warmth had been. Had I missed a sign? A quiet shift in tone. A look held too long? The confusion was a heavy blanket, smelling of betrayal, soft but suffocating. My fingers traced patterns on the window pane, the glass slick with condensation, mirroring the blurred edges of my understanding. This wasn't how it was supposed to feel. This wasn't the future I'd etched out so carefully, tracing its lines late into the night. The silence after the storm was louder than the storm itself, a deep resonant ache that settled in my bones. It felt like being erased, slowly, starting from the edges of who I thought I was. If you've ever felt like the people you loved the most hurt you the deepest, stay with me. This story might be yours too. And take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And if this touches your heart, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Before the soft weight of a sleeping child on my chest, before the constant hum of small needs filled my days, there was just me. I lived in a small apartment where the smell of old books and hopeful, half-finished projects lingered in the air. The walls were painted a color I'd picked, a defiant, bright yellow, because it felt like the future. My dreams weren't whispers back then. They were shouts, loud, vibrant aspirations that felt entirely within reach. I remember one evening, standing on the fire escape, the city lights a glittering carpet below me, the wind whipping my hair around my face. I closed my eyes and felt invincible. I was working on my writing, pouring everything I had into stories that felt urgent and necessary. The taste of cheap coffee fueled late nights hunched over my laptop. The rhythmic tap of the keys, a soundtrack to my ambition. There were challenges, of course. Rejection slips that felt like paper cuts to the soul, days when the words wouldn't come, the fear that maybe I wasn't good enough. But even those moments felt like part of the climb, necessary obstacles on the path I was carving out for myself. I envisioned a life where my words found their way into the world, where I traveled freely, gathering experiences like smooth stones. I wasn't just planning a future, I was building a self, brick by painstaking brick. Each one laid with purpose and a deep, abiding belief in what could be. That person felt so distinct, so complete, utterly defined by her own trajectory. He was so small, a tiny, fragile weight placed onto my chest. The bright lights of the room faded away. The buzzing noise of machines became a distant hum. All I could see, all I could feel was him. His skin impossibly soft and warm against mine, still damp from the journey. There was a faint, sweet scent about him, the purest smell I had ever known, unlike anything else in the sterile air. I remembered tracing the delicate curve of his ear with my fingertip, feeling the perfect miniature folds. That first cry, it wasn't just noise. It was a sound that ripped through the universe I thought I knew and rebuilt it entirely around that single, vulnerable note. It echoed not just in the room, but deep within my bones, a biological tremor that rearranged every cell. In that instant, the person I had been dissolved. The worries, the ambitions, the petty annoyances that used to consume me, they vanished like smoke. My world, which had felt so vast and complicated moments before, snapped into sharp turning point. Undeniable focus. It was just him now, just us. Holding him, truly holding him, felt like the anchor I hadn't known I was missing. There was a fierce, protective surge through me, primal and absolute. It was love, yes, an overwhelming, flooding tide of it. But it was also something else. Responsibility, an unshakable awareness that this tiny life depended utterly on me. The slow beat of his heart under my palm was a rhythm I knew I would measure my own life against from that day forward. The sheer fragility of him. The trusting way his tiny fist curled demanded a strength I hadn't known I possessed. This was the moment our story truly began. It wasn't in planning or waiting or even the long hours leading up to it. It was the quiet pause after the storm, with him finally here, breathing softly against me. In that hushed space, surrounded by the faint smell of antiseptic and the miracle of new life, the foundation was laid. My priorities didn't just shift, they imploded and reformed into a single unwavering beam, pointed directly at my son. Every decision, every breath, every future thought would be filtered through this new, profound reality. Our journey together, the one that would shape everything that followed, started right there, in that quiet, sacred moment. The world outside blurred into a constant dull hum. Inside our small home, life narrowed to the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, the soft, hungry cries, and the endless cycle of feeding, changing, trying to soothe. The first few months felt like navigating a dense fog, thick with exhaustion and a love so fierce it was almost painful. Sleep became a distant memory, replaced by fleeting, interrupted moments of rest that did little to replenish the well. I remember staring at the ceiling in the pre-dawn darkness, the weight of his tiny body on mine, feeling utterly depleted. My eyes burned. My body ached in places I didn't know existed. There were days the sheer repetition of it all felt suffocating. The smell of milk on my clothes, the sticky feel of spit up, the constant low-grade hum of anxiety. It was a constant giving, a pouring out of myself that seemed to have no end. These were the small sacrifices, the ones no one really saw or talked about. The forgotten meals left cold on the counter, the shower put off for hours, the quiet surrender of my own needs to the immediate, urgent needs of this miniature human. But then, there were the moments, the way his little hand, no bigger than a flower petal, would instinctively grip my finger. The soft sigh he'd let out when he finally fell asleep on my chest, his breath warm against my skin. The first time he truly looked at me, his eyes wide and clear, a flicker of recognition, a tiny spark of connection passing between us. In those moments, the exhaustion receded. The immense joy washed over me, a wave that momentarily drowned out the weariness. One particular night stands out. He was fussy, inconsolable for hours. I had walked the floor endlessly, my legs heavy, my mind numb with lack of sleep. Tears were close to the surface. I felt like a failure, incapable of comforting my own child. I sat on the floor, leaning against the crib, just watching him cry, a desperate, helpless ache in my chest. Then, in a brief lull, he quieted for a second and turned his head. His gaze, even through the tears, found mine, and he reached out, his tiny fingers blindly searching. I put my finger against his palm, and his hand curled around it with surprising strength. He didn't stop crying immediately, but the frantic edge softened. In that simple touch, that small, trusting grip, I felt the beginning of our bond solidify. It wasn't just about feeding and changing anymore. It was about this quiet, wordless communication, this profound connection that transcended the exhaustion and the sacrifice. It was the first true echo of the big love that was growing, day by day, fueled by little hands and overwhelming need. The school bus pulled away, a yellow giant swallowing him whole, and a sudden cold emptiness bloomed in my chest. It wasn't just the silence that rushed in to fill the space where his small hand had been clinging to mine moments before. It was the sharp, clear understanding that this was it. This was the beginning of a world I wouldn't fully inhabit with him, a landscape where his stories would only be shared in fragmented pieces at the end of the day, filtered through the unpredictable sieve of childhood memory. The smell of exhaust and damp autumn air seemed to mock my sudden vulnerability. Before this, our world had been a shared room, a shared space. His days were my days, but the crisp promise of autumn carried with it the reality of school days. It started with the nervous excitement of buying new shoes that squeaked just right on the polished department store floor. The thrill of picking out a backpack covered in cartoon characters. The smell of fresh paper and waxy crayons from the supply list. There was a sweetness to those preparations, a feeling of nesting for a new phase of life. But the reality hit hard. The early mornings, the rush to get breakfast eaten, the tangle of laces and jacket zippers. Packing lunches became a ritual I poured love and anxiety into, trying to ensure enough food, the right food, something that wouldn't get traded away or picked at. I'd fold notes into his lunchbox, tiny scraps of paper with silly drawings or whispered encouragements, hoping they'd be a small bridge back to me during the long hours apart. The house, once filled with his constant hum and chatter, became eerily quiet. I found myself walking through rooms, my steps echoing, picking up stray toys or half-finished drawings, remnants of a presence that was now elsewhere. He came home different. Not hugely, not at first, just a little bit more tired, a little bit less likely to immediately spill his entire day. There were new names, new rules, new jokes I didn't understand. He smelled faintly of glue sticks and playground dust. The ease of our earlier days, where every moment was shared, began to stretch thin. He was forming bonds, navigating social waters, facing small challenges, a scraped knee on the asphalt, a misunderstanding with a classmate, a tricky word he couldn't sound out. That happened entirely outside my view. I could only patch the scrapes, offer comfort and try to decipher the subtle shifts in his mood. The early days of school were his first real steps onto a path I couldn't walk with him, and the ground beneath my own feet felt suddenly less stable. My daughter's bedroom door wasn't just a barrier anymore. It felt like a solid wall, built brick by slow, painful brick between us. It slammed shut one afternoon, the sound echoing the sudden silence in my own heart. I stood outside, hand half raised, the scent of lavender fabric softener from her laundry basket I'd just folded, suddenly feeling alien and unwelcome in the hallway air. This wasn't my little girl's room. It was her world now, and I wasn't invited in. She was 13. It felt like overnight. The bright, open face I knew had become guarded, her eyes flickering with thoughts she wouldn't share. The easy chatter we'd always had dried up, replaced by shrugs and mumbled answers. It was the inevitable surge of adolescence. I knew, a tide pulling her away from my shore. But knowing didn't stop the ache. Her little hand, the one that used to fit so perfectly in mine, was longer now. Nail polish often chipped at the edges, and it no longer reached automatically for mine when we walked. A physical distance mirroring the emotional one. The growing pains were real for both of us. She was grappling with who she was, pushing against the boundaries that had always felt safe, testing the air outside the bubble of childhood. I watched, bewildered and a little scared, as the girl who loved stuffed animals and bedtime stories began to paint her room dark colors, listen to music I couldn't understand, and speak in a language of slang and inside jokes with friends I barely knew. Our misunderstandings piled up like laundry in the corner, over curfews, over clothes I thought were too revealing, over the friends she kept secret, over the way she looked at me, sometimes with a flicker of resentment I hadn't seen before. Simple questions turned into arguments. Gentle advice became nagging. Every conversation felt like navigating a minefield, searching for the version of her I knew, but only finding fragments of someone new and unfamiliar. The little girl I adored wasn't gone, not entirely, but she was fading, receding into the shadows of this emerging young woman who felt both close enough to touch and impossibly far away. I missed the easy trust, the spontaneous hugs, the way her face used to light up just because I walked into the room. That door felt heavier every time it closed. The fluorescent light of the kitchen hummed, a low, tired sound in the quiet house. My hands trembled slightly as I counted the worn bills on the counter, the edges soft and faded. It wasn't enough. Not again. I gripped the counter's edge, the smooth laminate cool beneath my fingers, trying to steady my breath. You were upstairs, maybe humming along to a cartoon, completely unaware of the knot twisting in my gut, the cold dread that washed over me. That was one of the countless moments. Moments where the weight of things I felt I had to handle alone pressed down until it was hard to breathe. During your childhood and adolescence, there were silent struggles, pressures I never let you see, not fully. Money was often tight, a constant, low-level anxiety that hummed beneath the surface of our lives, like that kitchen light. I'd pore over bills late at night, the smell of cheap paper and stale coffee filling the air, calculating, cutting back, trying to make it stretch. Every unexpected repair, every school trip felt like a mountain I had to climb in secret. There were worries about my own health sometimes, little aches and pains that felt much bigger in the quiet of the night. Whispers of what-ifs that I'd push away fiercely because I couldn't afford to be anything but strong for you. The fear was a taste like copper on my tongue. I learned to hold my smile steady, to keep my voice light, even when my shoulders ached with tension I couldn't release. I remember the softness of your cheek against mine during a hug, and the sudden, sharp pang of fear. What if I couldn't always be here? I shielded you from the hushed phone calls, the rejected applications, the moments I felt utterly alone and overwhelmed. I wanted your world to feel safe, predictable. I buffered the blows before they reached you. The effort was exhausting, a constant performance of calm I hoped you wouldn't see through. It was a heavy cloak I wore, one you never knew existed, because I always took it off before I came into your room. The scent of detergent on your clean laundry, the feel of your soft hair when I kissed your forehead goodnight. Those were anchors in the storm, reasons to keep the cloak tightly wrapped. These were my burdens, heavy and quiet, and I carried them so you wouldn't have to. The door slammed shut. Not just closed, but slammed. The sound vibrated through the house, a physical shockwave carrying all the anger, frustration, and rejection that had been building for months. It felt like a final punctuation mark on a sentence I hadn't seen coming, a definitive end to something I couldn't quite name yet, only feel the loss of. This wasn't my child anymore, not the one who used to tell me everything, whose hand felt small and safe in mine. This was a stranger, fueled by a storm I didn't understand, raging against everything familiar, everything me. This teenage rebellion wasn't a gradual slope. It felt like an abrupt, jarring shift into rough seas. The sweet smiles were replaced by tight lips and narrowed eyes. Every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. A simple question about school or friends could erupt into accusations of prying, of not understanding, of wanting to control. My voice, trying to be gentle, trying to bridge the growing distance, would be met with eye rolls and sighs that seemed to carry the weight of the world's exasperation. Their bedroom became a fortress. A music, always loud, was a physical barrier. The thumping bass, a constant reminder of a world they were immersing themselves in, a world I was excluded from. I'd stand outside sometimes, my hand hovering near the doorknob, just listening to the muffled sounds, trying to decipher what was happening inside, but it was all noise. I couldn't reach them through it. I felt this quiet despair settling over me, heavy and cold, like a damp stone in my chest. The child I knew, the connection we shared, felt like it was slipping through my fingers, dissolving like mist. The air in the house grew thick with unspoken words and simmering resentment. We were living together, sharing space, existing in separate realities. The scent of their room changed, a mix of something sweet and artificial. Sometimes the stale smell of confinement, other times the faint, unfamiliar scent of cigarette smoke clinging to their clothes, a scent of a world they were building that I wasn't invited into. Their touch, once easy and familiar, became rare, fleeting, or stiff when necessary. It was the feeling of losing them while they were still right there, under my roof, breathing the same air. That was the most profoundly sad. I felt like a ghost in my own home, watching my child drift further and further away on the rising tide of their own storm. The air in the house that evening felt heavy, not with sadness yet, but with a strange kind of quiet. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because the dinner was planned around the usual weeknight rush. Something quick, something easy. My hands still carried the faint, lingering scent of garlic and olive oil from preparing the pasta. My son was doing homework at the kitchen table, his head bent low over a textbook, the quiet scratching of his pen the only sound for a long while. My daughter was upstairs, the soft murmur of a TV show just audible. This specific circumstance was mundane. I needed something from the small storage room just off the living room. Something for tomorrow morning. A bag, maybe, or a specific book. I don't even recall what it was now. The object itself has become completely irrelevant, lost in the shadow of what happened next. I walked quietly through the living room, not wanting to disturb the stillness, the fragile peace we'd constructed after so many recent tensions. The light from the lamp in the corner cast long, gentle shadows, making the familiar room feel slightly foreign, hushed. The door to that storage room was slightly ajar. As I reached for the handle, ready to slip inside and retrieve whatever I needed, I heard voices from the kitchen, voices I recognized intimately. They weren't loud, not shouting or angry, but low, confidential. It was the tone that stopped my hand mid-air, that held my breath in my chest. Curiosity, light and innocent at first, turned quickly to something cold and heavy as I realized they weren't speaking to each other in the usual way. They were speaking about something, about someone. I froze, my ears strained, trying to decipher the whispered words over the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant drone of the television. The smell of garlic seemed to sharpen, cloying and suddenly unpleasant. Every instinct told me to announce myself, to push the door open and walk into the kitchen, to break the spell of their hushed conversation. But another part of me, a small, fearful part I hadn't known was there, kept me rooted to the spot, just outside the frame of the door, in the semi-darkness of the hall. It was the anticipation, the dread of what might be revealed in those low, guarded tones that held me captive in those final, agonizing moments before I heard your words. The air seemed to thicken, pressing in on me, and the quiet house felt suddenly vast and empty. The kitchen door wasn't quite closed, just a sliver of space, maybe an inch, maybe two. I was standing just outside it, my hand reaching for the handle, thinking I'd grab a glass of water. The air in the hallway felt cool against my skin, a slight draft coming from somewhere near the floorboards. I could hear the low murmur of voices from inside, your voice and someone else's, indistinct at first. I wasn't trying to listen, not really. Then the murmur stopped and your voice became sharp, clear, cutting through the quiet like broken glass. And the words came, aimed not at me, but about me. Words I was never meant to hear. Words that froze the blood in my veins. I wish she'd just die. 3 seconds, maybe less. That's how long those words took to travel that tiny distance from the kitchen, through the gap in the door and into my ears. 3 seconds to rewrite my entire understanding of everything. My hand, reaching for the cool metal of the doorknob, stopped. It trembled, not from cold, but from something deep inside cracking apart. The coolness of the air felt suddenly glacial, pressing in on my chest. I couldn't breathe. It was like a physical blow directly to the heart. My knees felt weak, threatening to buckle on the worn hallway carpet. Die? You wished I would die? The person you had shared years with, built a life with, shared a home with, shared children with. The person who had loved you despite everything, with a fierceness that sometimes felt too big for my own body. Disbelief flooded me. A bitter, choking wave. My mind scrambled, trying to make sense of the sound, the meaning. Had I heard correctly? Was I dreaming? Hallucinating? But the words hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. They echoed not just in my ears, but inside my skull, vibrating with a malevolent energy I couldn't comprehend. The physical pain started small, a tight knot in my stomach, and then bloomed outwards, searing through my chest, my arms, up into my throat. It wasn't metaphorical. It felt like something inside had been ripped, torn violently from its moorings. The hallway, the familiar paintings on the wall, the patterned rug beneath my feet, they all swam before my eyes, blurred and unreal. The world outside that sliver of door, the world where those words were spoken, was alien and terrifying. This wasn't our life. These weren't the words spoken by someone who loved you, or even someone who merely tolerated you. These were words filled with pure, cold malice, and they were directed at me. They didn't just hurt, they obliterated my sense of safety, my sense of self, my sense of us. It all turned to dust in that single, horrifying moment. My feet didn't feel like my own, carrying me away from the sound, away from the words. I stumbled slightly on the rug, the rough fibers scratching against my bare skin. But I didn't stop. The air felt thick and suffocating in the hallway, heavy with the unspoken things I had just heard. My chest was tight, a physical ache starting deep inside. I needed silence, absolute, deafening silence, to understand what my ears had just betrayed me with. I made my way to my room, the sanctuary I had built over years. Closing the door behind me felt like shutting out the world, a flimsy barrier against a tidal wave. The latch clicked softly, a small, final sound that left only the thumping of my own heart in my ears. I leaned against the door, the cool wood pressing against my back, feeling solid and real, when everything else felt like it was dissolving. My eyes scanned the familiar space, the stack of worn books on the nightstand, the old quilt on the bed, the soft light filtering through the curtains. It was supposed to be safe here, but the words followed me. They echoed in the sudden quiet, replaying with brutal clarity. Each syllable was a small, sharp stone thrown against the fragile glass of my understanding. They said, "That? About me?" The questions spun in my head, a chaotic storm. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest, trying to make myself small, invisible. The carpet felt soft beneath my cheek, a comforting texture in the midst of the internal chaos. My hands were trembling, not violently, but a fine, persistent tremor that I couldn't stop. This was the dramatic moment, sitting there, curled on the floor, realizing it wasn't just a misunderstanding. It wasn't a throwaway comment. It was a carefully articulated thought, a truth they held about me that they had never shared with me. It felt like a foundation crumbling, the ground shifting beneath my feet. Every memory I had, every moment of connection, was suddenly cast in a new, painful light. Had they always thought that? Were they always hiding this? The silence of the room was no longer peaceful. It was isolating. It amplified the noise inside my head, the accusations, the hurt, the raw, searing betrayal. Tears pricked at my eyes, hot and sudden, but I didn't let them fall yet. I just sat there, breathing shallowly, trying to process the sheer weight of the revelation. The solitude which I usually craved now felt like a prison, locking me in with the pain, with the understanding that some things, once heard, could never be unheard. I was alone with the wreckage, and I had to sort through it piece by painful piece. And so I sat there, the silence in the room thick and heavy, almost a physical weight pressing down. The idea of confronting you directly had surfaced, a sharp, hot impulse. My mind conjured images of words exchanged, of the truth finally laid bare, raw and bleeding between us. For a fleeting moment, it felt like the only way out, the only path to release this suffocating pressure in my chest. But then I looked out the window, at the old oak tree just outside, its branches bare against the gray sky. I thought about the energy it would take, the sheer exhausting effort of meeting your gaze, of navigating the inevitable denial or deflection. I tasted the metallic tang of weariness in my mouth, a taste far too familiar by then. The pain had settled so deep, like river stones smoothed over time, that stirring them all up felt futile. I remembered another time, years before, a different fight about something seemingly small, but the way your eyes had hardened, the cold edge in your voice. It wasn't just disagreement. It was a wall built between us, instantly and without apology. That memory, sharp and clear as broken glass, whispered a warning. What if a confrontation now didn't just build a wall, but shattered what little was left? Choosing not to fight wasn't about weakness, though it felt dangerously close to surrender sometimes. It was a calculation born of exhaustion and a desperate, fragile hope. A direct battle felt like stepping into a storm that would rage and destroy everything in its path, yourself included. Perhaps even innocence caught in the periphery. My son, my daughter. The thought of them witnessing that kind of raw, unleashed pain, the fallout of a confrontation that was too late and too damaging to be productive. It made my stomach clench. Their laughter, even muffled through closed doors, was too precious to risk silencing. My reasons were deeper than simply avoiding unpleasantness. It was about acknowledging that some damage is too profound to be healed by sharp words or demands for answers. It was about recognizing that my strength, what little I had left, needed to be preserved for the long, slow path of healing myself, piece by piece, away from the source of the hurt. It was a quiet internal pivot, a decision made not with a shout, but with a sigh, watching the dust motes dance in the thin afternoon light, understanding that the fight I needed to win was not with you, but within myself. The silence after they left was always the loudest sound in the house. It wasn't just the absence of their voices, or the scrape of chairs, or the soft click of the door closing. It was the echoing cavity where the words should have been. Mine. The ones I'd rehearsed, the ones I'd held behind my teeth, the ones that felt like slivers of glass trying to escape. They never did. Not right. Not in a way that built anything, only added another layer to the dusty, brittle silence. I remember sitting by the window one evening, the last light fading across the empty garden, painting the leaves in bruised purples and grays. The air was cool, carrying the damp scent of turned earth and distant wood smoke. I felt the familiar ache deep in my bones, a weariness that went beyond physical tiredness. It was soul deep. I had tried speaking. God, I had tried. Whispered pleas, choked explanations, even angry outbursts fueled by desperation. None of it worked. The words tangled, or they were ignored, or they simply evaporated into that vast, cold space between us. That's when the idea, fragile as a moth's wing, brushed against my mind. What if the words didn't have to be spoken aloud? What if they could just exist, placed somewhere, waiting, like finding an old photograph you didn't know was lost? It wasn't a sudden revelation, more like the slow, quiet settling of dust. Speaking was a performance, a live wire prone to sparking and burning. Writing could be slow, careful. It could be edited, refined, imbued with the quiet persistence that I couldn't muster in the heat of a moment. What kind of message? It had to be everything I couldn't say face to face. Not a list of grievances, not demands, something softer perhaps, something that explained the why behind the years of stumbling silence and missed connections. It had to carry the weight of my love, which felt buried under rubble, but also the sharp edges of the truth I needed them to see, the truth about how we got here. It wouldn't be angry, it wouldn't be pleading, it would be witness. A quiet, steady testament left like a stone placed carefully on a path, hoping one day they might pass by and see it. That was the hope, a sliver, but it felt like the only one left. The screen stared back, blank and unforgiving. I placed my fingers on the keyboard, but they felt clumsy, heavy. This wasn't just typing, it was excavating. Each word felt like digging through hardened earth, trying to unearth roots that had grown deep and twisted over years. I had to write it all down. The message I had held inside for so long, the truth I had buried even from myself sometimes. Revisiting the memories was like walking through a house I hadn't visited in decades, finding rooms boarded up, filled with dust and the ghosts of laughter and tears. The air felt thick with the weight of what had happened. I saw flashes, sunlight catching dust motes in a familiar room, the pattern on a rug, the way someone's eyes looked when they said something cutting, disguised as concern. The scent of old paper and something vaguely metallic, like dried tears, seemed to cling to the edges of my awareness. It wasn't just remembering what happened, but feeling the echoes of how it felt, the clench in my stomach, the sudden heat in my face, the cold shock that followed. Confronting my own feelings was perhaps the hardest part. Not just the obvious hurt, but the tangled mess of loyalty, disappointment, and a persistent, aching love that refused to die. Was I allowed to feel angry? Was my sadness valid, or just overreaction? I had to untangle the story I told myself from the story that actually unfolded. It felt like pulling apart threads that had been knotted together so tightly they were indistinguishable. My own feelings entwined with theirs, with the expectations, with the silence. My chest felt tight, an almost physical pressure, as I tried to name emotions I had pushed down for years. Then came the task of articulation, of attempting to give voice to the untold truths. How do you explain a lifetime of subtle shifts, of unspoken rules, of moments that felt small at the time, but accumulated into a mountain? How do you describe the unique pain of being hurt by the people who were supposed to protect you, to understand you, without words? The words felt inadequate, clumsy, like trying to capture mist in my hands. I wrote a sentence, then deleted it. Wrote another, feeling the inadequacy of it, the way it failed to convey the depth of the ache. My fingers hovered over the keys, trembling slightly, the silence in the room amplifying the frantic noise inside my head. This wasn't just writing. It was bleeding onto the page, hoping that someone, somewhere, might finally see the wounds. This internal battle, the wrestling with words and memories and pain, felt like a dramatic performance happening solely within the confines of my own mind. The only audience, the blank screen. There are things from back then, little moments, big sacrifices that I don't think you ever really saw. Or maybe you saw them, but didn't understand what they cost me. I need you to hear them now. I remember the winter you were 8, my son. The furnace broke. It was just before Christmas, the kind of cold that bites deep into your bones, makes the air sting in your lungs. I worked 2 jobs then, barely sleeping. Coming home to that quiet, frigid house, I could see my breath hang in the living room air. The only warmth was a small electric heater I dragged from room to room, trying to keep you two from freezing in your beds. I remember sitting by my daughter's bed one night, just watching you sleep under a pile of blankets and coats. The small heater hummed a lonely tune, casting a weak orange glow on the wall. My hands were raw from the extra hours, aching from handling frozen goods at the warehouse. I touched your forehead. It was cool, but not icy like the air. I felt a fear so sharp, so primal, that I thought it might just crack me open. The fear of failing you, of not being able to provide even basic warmth and safety. I sat there until dawn, shivering, listening to the house creak in the cold, the smell of dust and old metal from the heater filling the air. That wasn't just a broken furnace. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, of standing alone against a tide I felt I couldn't control, just praying you wouldn't get sick. That sacrifice wasn't just the money I scraped together for the repair. It was the piece of my spirit that withered a little in that bone-chilling quiet. Under the weight of that fear, you never had to know. It was the taste of despair, bitter and cold, swallowed down with every shaky breath. I remember the sting of it, sharp and sudden, like breathing in air so cold it sears your lungs. It wasn't just the sound of the words, brittle and cutting. It was the way they landed, precisely aimed at the softest parts of me. You feel that kind of hurt deep, right in the core, where the very roots of you are tangled up irrevocably with the roots of your child. For a moment, just a split second, the shock was so profound it felt like a physical blow, like the room had tilted, the colors draining away. It was easy, in that instant, to imagine a wall going up inside me, thick and cold and impenetrable. Anger feels like a clean, hard line, doesn't it? A boundary you draw quickly to protect the fragile self exposed by the wound. But then, something else takes over. Something slower, warmer, and infinitely more complicated. It's the part of you that remembers the insistent grip of tiny fingers around just one of yours. The sweet, specific smell of baby powder mixed with warm skin from the curve of their neck. The perfect weight of their small head resting against your chest. The rhythmic sound of their breathing in the dark. It's the part that saw past the sudden sharpness in their eyes now, past the brave face, the confusion masked by sharp edges. You see past the action, past the hurtful words that hang in the air long after they're spoken, and you see the vulnerable child still flickering somewhere inside the adult standing before you. You see their pain, perhaps, even if it's a pain they don't understand or can't articulate, a pain that might have driven them to lash out. That, I think, is the peculiar, almost maddening depth of a mother's heart. It isn't just a physical muscle pumping blood. It's a vast, invisible space inside you that holds every single memory, every scraped knee you kissed better, every monsters under the bed check, every bedtime story whispered softly in the dark, every wild, improbable dream you ever had for them, and every quiet fear that kept you awake. It's a chamber that expands endlessly, making room for the boundless joy, yes, but also for the relentless worry, the quiet disappointment, and the sharp ache of misunderstanding. And the most bewildering, miraculous thing is, that chamber doesn't shrink, doesn't harden, even when it's been deeply bruised or seemingly broken. It just holds the hurt alongside the love, absorbing it, processing it, refusing to let go. I could have chosen anger in that moment. It would have been easier, perhaps, a quicker way to feel strong again, a surge of righteous indignation that might have masked the pain. But what would that have truly built between us? More distance? More silence? My message to you isn't built on tearing down what little connection might remain, but on reaching out with understanding, on empathy. It's about seeing the struggle beneath the surface, the invisible wounds that might have driven those actions, and wrapping them gently in the enduring, uncomplicated truth. The truth that my love for you isn't conditional on your choices, or your words, or your ability to understand me, or even your love for me. It simply is, like the air we breathe, like the slow, inevitable turning of the seasons. It's a constant, a given, a fixed point. And facing the hurt with that unwavering love, with empathy for the person who is hurting you, seeing their humanity and their struggle, that's the hardest, most essential work of a mother's heart. It's what allows the faintest possibility of healing to bloom, like a fragile flower pushing up through concrete, the quiet scent of hope in the aftermath. I chose the small, carved wooden box, the one you kept your old coins in, the one I gave you years ago. It sat on your bedside table, always within reach. It felt right somehow, a place of hidden treasures, now holding a final, fragile truth. My fingers trembled as I lifted the heavy lid, the wood smooth and cool beneath my touch. The scent of aged metal and dust rose faintly. Inside, I placed the single folded sheet of paper. It wasn't long, just a few lines, the ink slightly smudged where a tear had fallen as I wrote it, sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight. The only sound, the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart. Leaving the house after that was the hardest part. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken words, and the weight of the secret now tucked away in that box. I remember the click of the front door latch sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. Then came the waiting. An eternity stretched out before me, measured in the slow sweep of clock hands and the rise and fall of my own shallow breaths. I couldn't settle anywhere. I paced the small confines of my own space, the floorboards creaking under my restless feet. Every distant siren, every car engine that slowed on the street outside, sent a jolt of icy fear through me. My hands were constantly cold, even though I rubbed them together until the skin felt raw. I made tea, but the warm mug felt alien in my grasp. The scent of the leaves offering no comfort. My mind replayed every possible scenario. Would you even open the box? Would you find the note? And if you did, what would that look like? Your face contorted in anger? Your eyes blank with disbelief? Or worse, a quiet, devastating sorrow that mirrored my own? The uncertainty was a gnawing ache in my stomach, a constant hum of dread. I imagined the paper in your hands, the words I'd chosen so carefully landing like stones, or perhaps crumbling to dust. The silence from your end was deafening. Each passing minute amplified the fear that I had made a terrible mistake, that the message would shatter everything we had, or perhaps reveal that it was already broken beyond repair, the pieces too sharp to ever fit back together. The air in the room felt thin, suffocating, filled only with the echoes of my own anxieties and the terrifying blankness of waiting for a reaction that might never come, or might be far worse than I could possibly imagine. The paper felt thin and cold in my hand, impossibly heavy with the weight of the words written there. I remember the silence that fell, a silence so profound it pressed in on my ears, making them ring faintly. My fingers traced the loops of the handwriting, rough against my skin. It wasn't a sudden storm of tears, but a slow, seeping ache that started deep inside my chest and spread outwards, killing my limbs. The world outside felt distant, muffled, as if seen through thick glass. I could still catch the faint, papery smell of it, dry and a little dusty, like secrets kept too long. Understanding didn't come in a flash, but in fractured pieces, like looking at a shattered mirror. Each fragment reflected a painful truth I hadn't seen or hadn't wanted to see before. There were moments sitting alone in the quiet house, rereading lines where a new layer of meaning would reveal itself. And the ache would sharpen briefly before settling back into a dull throb. Healing felt less like repairing something broken and more like learning to live with something permanently altered. It was slow, uneven, marked by days of quiet acceptance, followed by sudden, unexpected waves of grief or anger. The dramatic moment wasn't loud. It was the soft click in my mind when I finally accepted that this wasn't a misunderstanding to be fixed, but a reality to be processed. It was letting go of the possibility of things being different and acknowledging the fact of what they were. This understanding didn't make the pain disappear, but it shifted it, making it bearable. The message didn't just change how I saw that part of my past. It reshaped how I saw love, trust, and even myself. It left a mark, like a watermark, on the fabric of our relationship, sometimes invisible, but always present if you held it up to the light just right. For me, it meant a quiet recalibration of my own heart, a deepening of the understanding that people, even those closest to us, carry their own unseen burdens and make choices we might never fully comprehend. It was the start of learning to carry that weight, not erase it. Months softened into years. The sharpness of that day, the sting of the paper, the ringing silence, they faded like old photographs left too long in the sun. The message itself became just an object, tucked away, its power diffused by time and distance. What remained wasn't the shock, but the quiet, lingering presence of knowing. Like a stone worn smooth by a river, the jagged edges of hurt smoothed out, leaving behind a quiet understanding. There were still moments, brief and fleeting, when a smell, a sound, or a shared look would bring a faint echo of the ache. But it was no longer debilitating. It was just a reminder, a gentle whisper of a past that shaped the present. The world outside continued its turning. The seasons shifted, the sun still rose. Life went on, quieter now, perhaps a little more cautious, but also, strangely, more resilient. There was a quiet peace that settled in, a stillness that came from accepting the broken pieces and finding a way to carry them, not as a burden, but as a part of the story. It wasn't the ending I had ever envisioned, but it was, finally, a quiet place to simply be.